Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on Introduction to R Programming for Clinical SAS Programmers. In this series, we are exploring SAS programming feature alternatives in R Tidyverse package. In this video, we will see how to subset variables. So using keep option first. So let us say we have this input dataset in which there are 5 variables: name, sex, age, height, and weight. So from this, we are only interested in having 3 variables: name, sex, and age, which means we are subsetting the list of variables. Out of 5, we are only subsetting 3. So how do we do it in SAS? So there are multiple ways of achieving this in SAS using keep is equal to dataset option or keep statement or drop statement. So but here we'll see how to make use of keep statement to subset the selected required variables. So here we are specifying the names of the variables which have to be kept in the final output dataset, which is named as subset here. That so when we execute this piece of code, only 3 variables will be returned to the output dataset, which means height and weight will be dropped, which we are not interested in. So how do we do it in R? So we can do that in R in tidyverse package using the select function. So the first argument for the select function is the name of the input dataset and followed by the names of the variables that need to be kept in the output dataset. So here the syntax can be read as or interpreted as, so create a dataset named subset by reading SAS data, class dataset, and but select only the variables which are named as name, sex, and age. Also remember that the variable names are case sensitive here in R, unlike SAS. So let us now move to the next option. So we can in fact drop the variables which are not required for us. So how do we do it? Again, so we have the same data set. Again, here we are interested in keeping only 3 variables, which means we are not interested in having height and weight. So if the list of variables to be kept is long and if the other variables which are to be dropped is small, so we can make use of the drop feature. So how do we do that? So here in SAS, we have a statement called drop statement, which can be used to specify the names of the variables which we want to drop from the dataset. So here we are reading all the variables from class, but at the time of writing subset dataset, the variables height and weight will be dropped from this dataset, which means again the 3 variables name, sex, and age will be written to the output dataset. So how do we do this in R? So again, so the syntax for this is, again we can make use of select function. So we are creating a new dataset named subset by reading class. So all we need to do is specify the minus sign before the name of the variable for it to be dropped. So if we just name the variable, it will be kept. If we want to drop a variable, we need to specify a minus sign before the name of the variable. So here I am specifying a minus sign before height variable and a minus sign before weight variable. So from all the variables present in class dataset, height variable will be dropped and also weight variable will be dropped. So which will give us this dataset with the variables name, sex, and age. So sometimes what happens is if we have a long list of variables which share a common pattern, and if we want to drop all the variables which begin or end with that pattern, so we have colon operator in SAS to mention the at all the variables, which here in this case, if when we say drop h colon and w colon, what how SAS interprets this is all the variables which begin with the letter h has to be dropped, and all the variables which begin with the letter w has to be dropped. So do we have a similar pattern or this thing in R? Yes. So we have a modifier, something called as starts with, in the select function itself. So here what we are trying to do here is, as we are dropping the variables, so with the starts with, we are again specifying the minus sign here, which means all the things that match this logic will be dropped. So as we are dropping, so all the variables which begin with the letter H and letter W have to be dropped. So we are listing that list of values using C function, so which is actually creating that we all the variables which start with H, which is to be specific, all the variables which begin with the letter capital H and capital W have to be dropped. So this starts with is identifying all the variables which begin with H and W, but as we are using minus sign here, those variables will be dropped. So this returns the list of variables which begin with H and W, and this minus signs forces them to be dropped from the dataset. So let us move on to the next thing. So here again, so we do not have a SAS equivalent for it. So we can in fact drop all the variables which end with a particular sequence or pattern. So here we have this ends with modifier in the select function or argument for which. So this ends with identifies all the list of variables which will have a small letter t at the end. So here in this case, so we have small letter t here in height variable and small letter t in weight variable. So this again will drop the variables height and weight because as those two meet the condition. So this ends with is identifying the list of variables, and this minus sign is forcing that list of variables to be dropped from the dataset. So now we will see the demo of this in a while. So I'll open the SAS window and R window side by side. So here let's create the master dataset that will be used for this example. So I have created this dataset called class. So here I have used F3 button on my keyboard so to submit this selected piece of code. So here I have 6 observations and 5 variables: name, sex, age, height and weight. From this I am interested in keeping only name, sex and age. So here we can just subset the required variables by specifying the required variables on the keep statement. So let us run this piece of code and then see the log. There are no unwanted messages or something of that sort. So if we open this, so as we have listed on the name, sex and age variables on the keep statement, only those variables are present in our subset. So let us see the parallel version of it by explicitly specifying the list of variables that have to be kept using the select function of tidyverse package of R. So let us create the input dataset here first. So let's select this and click the run button. So we have class dataset created which has 6 observations and 5 variables. So from this I am interested in keeping only the name, sex and age variables. So again remember that the names of the variables are case sensitive in R. So here we are specifying from class dataset create a subset dataset but keep only the variables name, sex and age. So let us select this and run. So let's see now in the subset we only have 6 observations of 3 variables. So let's open this and then see name, sex and age. So we have got the same result like how we got it in SAS. So now let us make use of, or let us try to see the case wherein we were dropping the variables. So we are dropping the variables height and weight here. So let us try to execute this and again examine the subset. So let us go to the log and then see if there were any issues. There are no such cases. So let's open. So and again, so we here instead of keeping the required variables, we are dropping the unwanted variables. The unwanted variables were height and weight. So we specified them here on the drop statement. So let us now go to the R version of it. So in order to specify that a variable has to be dropped as discussed in the presentation, so we need to just mention the negative sign before the name of the variable. So that variable will be dropped. So out of all the variables we were interested in keeping name, sex and age, but drop height and weight, which means so we need to list them with a negative sign here. So let us select this piece of code and then try to run this and then see. So again here subset is generated with the value of 6 observations and 3 variables. Again the result will be the same as like previous. So now let us see the case of dropping the variables which begin with a pattern. So here I am specifying that all the variables which begin with the letter H and also which begin with the letter W have to be dropped. So when I execute this piece of code, my subset will look similar to the previous because I only had one variable which beginning with H and one variable which was beginning with W. They were height and weight. So similarly, so I'm getting the same end result of name, sex, and age. So let us try to run this piece of code again, which is parallel to that. So here we are identifying the list of variables which begin with the letter capital H and capital W, and then specifying the minus sign to that list. So those variables will be dropped. So let us run this piece of code and then see. So I have run that piece of code and let us examine the output. So again, those variables are dropped. So now let us see. So we do not have a SAS alternative for like to identify the variables which end with a pattern. So we can only have identify the list of variables which begin with a pattern, but we will not be able to do that in SAS which end with a pattern. So here we have that feature in R select function which has that feature of like ends with. So here the list of variables which end with the letter T would be identified in our case. So we have two variables. One is height, which has small letter T at the end, and the second one is weight, which has again the letter T at the end. So the list of variables which end with T would be identified here, and then as we are specifying the minus sign, that list of variables would be dropped from the output data set. So let us run this. So I have executed this piece of code and then let's examine the output dataset. Again, the same end result is achieved. So this is how we can make use of select function, and also by using the minus n we can drop the variables and we can identify the variable pattern using starts with or ends with. And we also have something called as contains, so which it does not need to be beginning with or ending with. We can even identify the variables which has any text anywhere in between. So for that we can make use of contains modifier of the select function. So thank you for watching and keep learning.